I want to welcome everyone, our presenters and the ones that aren't presenting that are joining us on our session. So welcome everyone to our panel session, Regional, State, and National Virtual Internships, Opening the Doors of Possibilities. This session is highlighting several of our interns who had virtual placements in the response to COVID-19. Before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded and we ask that all participants keep your mic muted unless you are asking a question. We also ask that participants keep their video off to protect the bandwidth and hopefully prevent potential issues with lagging. Okay, so let's get started with brief introductions of our intern panelists. First, we have Haley Hidalgo, who is from Lake Charles, an intern with the St. Mary Foundation, who facilitates adoptions throughout Louisiana. Next up, we have Jill Johnson, who is from Iowa, an intern with the Louisiana region of the American Red Cross, who provides health and safety training services across Louisiana. Third, we have Megan Marshall, who is from DeRidder, an intern with the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence, who advocates for the survivors of domestic violence across Louisiana. Fourth, we have Ashley Martin, who is from Lake Charles, an intern with United Way's SWLA's Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program for residents across Southwest Louisiana. And lastly, we have Katie Rosa, a lifetime resident of Lake Charles and a national intern for Campfire National Headquarters in Missouri. Campfire is a national youth development program who believes that young people want to shape the world. Campfire provides the opportunity to find their spark, live their voice, and discover who they are. Now it's time for question and answer with the interns. Interns, if your camera is not already on, please turn your cameras on now so we could see you. As a reminder for attendees, please keep your cameras off for the duration of the session so that we could focus on the panelists. We also ask that all attendees leave your microphones off unless you are asking a question. This will help keep any unexpected sounds from distracting the rest of the session. If you have a question for the interns, please use the raise hand feature and I will call on you to ask your question. The raise hand is found in the meeting toolbar on the left of the red leave button. You can also raise your hand by clicking Control, Shift, and K at the same time. If you would prefer to type your question, feel free to type it in the session chat and I will read it to the interns. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. Sounds good to everyone? So I will start off with the questions and I'll start off with a question for Ashley. Traditionally, internships have been face-to-face. So what type of impact did COVID-19 have on your internship?
Sorry. For my internship, they usually do face-to-face training for the VITAL program, but this, of course, due to COVID, this time they couldn't do face-to-face training. And also, usually they only do, from what she told me, they only do like in person, like you meet with the family or you meet with the person that want to do their taxes, you meet with them and you do it all like in an office or all at a computer. But this time it was virtual. So the clients had the option to just bring their information or email their information and then it'll get to us and then we'll file it virtually in our home versus having to go to the site and do it.
Great answer. I always wondered too. Sorry.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. I'm sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties. What I was saying was that I wondered how that would impact you guys as clients. Like because some people want to be face to face and get a, person to person feel, especially when you're dealing with people's finances. So how do you think that impacted you guys as clients? Do you think maybe people felt like a disconnect from you guys, or you felt like it was probably about this? It would have been the same if they would have been face to face.
No, I know this year she did say they had way less people than they usually have, and it was because of COVID. What you said, people didn't feel safe emailing or bringing their stuff. They wanted to do it right then, and also with the hurricanes, a lot of people are still displaced, or a lot of people aren't back home yet. So that had a lot to both of those things had a lot to do with them having less people, less clients.
Right. Did anyone else have any questions for Ashley? Okay, I see. I'm sorry, guys. I see Miss White was raising her hand. Go ahead, Miss White.
Thank you, Kristen. So
Yes,
Ashley, I guess a couple of comments and then our question. So my first comment is that one of our other interns, I believe Pamela, was with United Way in the Lafayette area, and she was telling me that they had a huge influx of people at the last minute trying to contact their VITA program. And so when she was telling me that, I was thinking about you and how busy it might possibly get. But the other thing I wanted to point out for you is that your training was online, which was unusual, but that was especially significant because it's an official IRS training, right? And so could you talk about what that training process looks like?
Well, for me, I had to, they have a website called Link and Learn. And on that website, you go through different scenarios of, like, for example, like this fake customer might bring you all these tax information, and they might have a kid that's a certain age. So then you'll have to put in the information, and you have to put the information in, and it'll highlight what information you need to go find, or what tax rules you need to apply to this client. So it's a lot of like scenario type training.
And a test. Don't forget, you had to pass tests too.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. And you had to study you had to study that, and then you had to take a test, and you had to pass it with at least an 80%. So all the information that you learned through that website, you had to take the test in order to even be a tax preparer. And the test, for me, I thought I wasn't going to pass it because I thought it would be a lot of information, but the test was kind of like the training. It was like scenario, and you had to find the answer and look it up. And the good thing about it was, I was thinking I would have to just remember all these tax rules and regulations, but you can look them up. You don't have to just remember them. You can look them up and see what you need to do to figure it out. And the program that we use too, it kind of walk you through it. So like if you put something wrong in the system, and even once we start doing lives, when we put it in, if they think it's wrong or they think that it kind of don't make sense, it'll pop up and be like, are you sure this is what you want to put in? So going through the training the way I thought it was going to be wasn't how it really was. Like, I thought I was just going to have to remember all this information, but I really didn't. I had other resources that I could use to find the information.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anybody else has any questions for Ashley before we move on to another question for another intern? Okay, so moving on. I'm going to ask Haley a question. So I'm thinking, what is the secret ingredient? Because this is all just something that's new to everyone, the pandemic. So what is the secret ingredient to making a virtual internship a success?
I guess I would have to say communication, which sounds corny, but your main contacts are always going to be through the computer, through the phone. And sometimes things can get misinterpreted or really confusing. So you just have to make sure you're working hard to communicate and make sure that you're understanding everything that they're telling you and stuff like that.
That's a good answer. I think a lot of, like just personally, I work with a lot of people that are older, and technology seems to be a barrier. So even whenever, the pandemic was going on, Miss White knows I did mine during COVID happened during my internship. So that was super hard for a lot of the people that I was interning with to communicate via technology, our Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams. So that's a very good answer. Anybody has a question for Haley or wants to add to what she answered? Okay, so I'll go ahead. It looks like, I'm sorry, Mary has raised her hand, so go ahead, Mary. Mary, did you have a question? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. Let's see.
Wait, hold on. Sorry.
Oh,
I was trying to get it to unmute, and it wouldn't unmute.
I'm sorry.
So my question is, so I also did virtual, and I really was struggling, like, oh, am I gonna be really a part of the team? So my question is, did you really feel like you were a part of their team? Did you really feel like if you were there in person, you would be having that same experience?
I definitely feel like if I had been there in person, it would have been a bit of a better experience. The first half of my internship, my only contact there was my supervisor, Miss Leslie. And so it did not feel like so much of me being part of the team as she's just relaying everything to me. And I just work with her. But then I did, one of my artifacts was a StoryCorps interview with Miss Terry, which is their director. And that really helped me to feel like part of the team. And I know Miss Leslie did her best in the beginning as well. She would tell me like everyone's names and what they do. And she'd always bring them back up to remind me like, okay, this person does this. This is what happened to her this week. So that really helped me feel like part of the team as well.
Okay, that's a great answer, Haley. It looks like we also have Casey Jones that has a question, so you could go ahead when you're ready.
Hey, Haley. So you mentioned that sometimes with only communication through a computer, text, whatever, sometimes things get misunderstood. I've had that happen to me before. How did you use that experience to push through and do it a little better the next time you had to communicate with someone? If you understand that, it's kind of confusing.
I know exactly what you're saying. So my supervisor and I would have our Zoom meetings every week, but then the rest of the week we pretty much just emailed and text messaged for what we were doing. And I think if something got confusing or mixed up in our communications, we would stop, we would phone call our Zoom, or we would have to reword what we were saying just to make it more clear and obvious. And she's a really understanding and sweet and patient person, which you kind of have to be in her field, but she made it a lot easier.
Okay. So we are going to move on. That's a great response, Haley. Thank you for sharing those experiences with us. So I just want to ask maybe Megan. We are talking about challenges, which is to be expected, especially with the pandemic and learning to have to do an internship virtually, possibly. What are some challenges created by having your virtual placement?
I think one of the biggest challenges I had was LCADV doesn't normally do internships that aren't on site, and most of their internships are done with they're like legal internships for lawyers and stuff who are wanting to work in that field. So this is kind of their first try at this, and I feel like part of the problem when you're dealing with like laws and things being implemented, it's hard because it has to go through so many channels. So what we had truly planned for the focus of my internship was for me to help implement a way for every parish's sheriff department to know these are the new gun laws regarding domestic violence, and we need to figure out how you're implementing them. Well, because we have to go through so many steps, if other people kind of lag, then you can't really get to my step. And so we had a problem with that. And I think if I were there, it would have moved along faster because I would be able to meet with more people and get it taken care of versus it just being something that someone else is having to coordinate and then feed me the information. The only real contact I had was with my supervisor and then the head of LCADB. I did some Zoom calls, but most of those were just kind of educational purposes for me, not for me to actually interact. So.
All right, great answer. Does anybody have any questions for Haley or wants to, I'm sorry, Megan, or wants to add to anything that she said? Okay, so let's move on. I actually have a question for Katie. I know that some people may or may not have fears because some people they are better virtually. I'm one of those people. So what are some fears, if you had any, did you have going into your intern specifically related to it being virtual?
I didn't know that virtual internships existed. So I was walking into this and it's crazy because I feel like I've been kind of on my game with technology, but I learned very quickly that I'm not. So for me at Campfire National Headquarters, they started years ago doing 2 or 3 days in the office and then 2 or 3 days at home. So it kind of depends on the department. So they were very well scripted whenever it came to hosting virtual meetings. So I didn't know that going in. They actually have somebody who's pretty high at the national office who works out of Seattle. So since the day that she got hired, she's been virtual and really doing a lot. So I was really impressed to see how much we could truly leverage and how much information we could get done. We didn't do much text. We jumped on virtual calls several days a week. They got me enrolled in Workplace, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is, but that's like a derivative of Facebook, but for business offices. And so we're on Workplace, and then that's where we would do our virtual meetings. And sometimes we would sit on there for hours. So my first weeks, it was just crazy because I remember sitting in like a 4-hour like Zoom call with these people, and they're cranking out documents and emails and newsletters and just a variety of different stuff. And I was just baffled. Like I had to learn how to keep up with the chats and keep up with the attachments that I was being emailed. So it was more than just having some FaceTime on, but we were very interactive with our virtuals, if that makes any sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Okay, it looks like I'll give Haley an opportunity to respond.
I just wanted to ask, with your virtual internship and them being advanced, because I didn't know that virtual internships were a thing either. I wanted to ask if you got like overwhelmed and if y'all did anything like outside of the work meetings that involved technology that you were just like, I have no idea how to do this.
Yeah, I'm going to say everything that happened at Campfire, I had no idea how to deal with. But so the way that they're set up is that they have every week they have like 2 or 3 different types of meetings. So every other week they have an informal staff meeting, and each week they highlight a different staff member. So last week we had our informal staff meeting, And this guy, Ben, was telling us about kayaking, and he's showing personal pictures. So they use these informal staff meetings for us to really connect with one another. And I thought that that was really cool because they had thought beyond just jumping on a Zoom call and having some conversations, but they had created some structure for it. So I had problems getting my calendar to link because I was having problems. Campfire issued me an email address, and that email address was very mad at my niece email address and calendar. So they both like continually bounced emails to the entire staff and myself. So that was kind of the biggest thing, was for me to be able to keep up on when the different meetings were, because it wasn't just Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. It was, you know, Tuesday at 4, and then every other, or once a month on a Thursday at 1. Like, it was, they were all just weird times. So I kind of struggled across the board trying to keep up with the calendar, and literally everything that they did was just a billion times more advanced than me. I did a takeover, and I didn't even know what that was. Like, I had to Google what a takeover was before. And thank goodness they came in and like swooped in to help me out, because I was suffocating myself on that. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Haley. Does anybody have any questions for Katie before we move on?
Hey, hello. This is Dr. Elijah. I do have a question. I asked that question in other groups before, and it wasn't the question. I mean, it wasn't the group that Katie was in. So, Katie, everybody, it's my question to everyone, but now, Katie. So you have taken this internship in the spring. But before you took this internship in the spring, you had a course in the fall that was called Family Life Education Methods and Practice. So the methodology course, remember that course? So my question is, to what degree or how much did that fall semester course prepared you for this internship? What could you not do in your internship had you not had that course in the fall? Or what did you benefit from that methodology course in this spring semester internship? Thank you.
That's a great question, Dr. Elijah. So in the FLE methods class, you know, we had to put together our service learning project. And one thing that Ms. White really kind of harnessed in on was to make sure that we were doing our needs assessment, and then to assure that we're getting feedback. So as basic as those things are, and I know that we've heard that stuff in a whole bunch of classes, but in that class in particular, we were physically going out. We created our own needs assessment, and then we physically created our feedback and figured out how to get that to our people and then get it back to us, you know? So every time I would meet with the national staff, they would ask my feedback. So what I feel like, and they were doing constant needs assessments. They're sending out surveys at an endless rate. So for me, what I realized is that this big organization that is servicing kids across the nation, they are taking those same tools and using that on a much broader spectrum. And the reason why they've been successful for 100 years is because they're taking the feedback, they're gathering that information, and then they're actually creating reports. They do internal and external feedback reporting. So like one of the projects that I had to do was a culture survey. And what they did was they sent out questions to the national staff about how they felt about different scenarios. And so the person who is my direct supervisor is the head of marketing at Campfire. So me and her met, and we read all this data, and then we created a PowerPoint that had you know, different graphs and figures to kind of be able to relay that information. So they took in the feedback, and then they compiled it all together and then presented that feedback to the staff. And I thought that it was really cool to do that because they were so fluid in that information. There was nobody that was in any of those meetings had any kind of mystery. We all knew where everybody, not specifically where everybody stood, but what the pulse of the organization felt like. And I think that that's probably my biggest lesson that I took, and that's probably the biggest asset that I gained from FLE, was to have that harnessed in, knowing that that was something that was just going to be very important to my internship.
Thank you, Dr. Elijah. That's a great response, Katie. Okay, so
Thank you. Thank you.
yes, sir. Okay, so I'm going to move on this question to Jill. So I want to know the nature of virtual internships removes geographic barriers. Was it difficult to adjust your mindset to embrace the many possibilities once geography was no longer a limitation? Why or why not?
No, for me it wasn't hard. I mean, like you said, my internship was all done virtually through Zoom. So going into it, I was prepared that we could potentially do presentations in schools anywhere in the United States. So it was definitely, I kept my mind open. I knew it was going to be much easier using Zoom, of course. We had different scripts that they prepared for the different regions that we would present to, because each presentation was specific for that region and what hazards they went through. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to talk to anyone or present to any students outside of Louisiana. I did present to other parishes, so and they all wanted the hurricane early hazard preparedness. But no, I could definitely see where it would be much easier using technology or having a virtual internship and being able to work, say, in a different region of the United States or even a different country, and how easy it is to access that through Zoom. It didn't feel weird at all.
That's a great response. I actually agree with you. I think we're living in a different world, so we have to be prepared for those types of things. Ms. White does have a question, so go ahead when you're ready.
I do. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
So, so my question is, I know when I look at your metrics that you've submitted, the number of children that you provided this program for, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so could you, for those who have not seen your presentation, could you enlighten us about kind of the metrics involved in that? And then maybe talk about how you think it would have been different, either greater or lesser, if you had been in a face-to-face environment.
Right. So, or the way we do, when we do our presentation, there was usually about 4 to 5 of us. My supervisor, Miss Jody, when we would present to the students, we would have to ask them questions. We always have a quiz at the end. There's about 10 questions we would ask just to make sure they were understanding our presentation. Using the chat box, or sometimes with the kids, if we had time, they would come to the camera and tell us their answers or raise their hand. She would collect all the data. So I was able to present to 7 schools. There was a total of 274 students I presented to. So I definitely think if we were in person, I'm not sure if we would have been able to present to that many students at one time, because obviously the kids are allowed through Zoom. Each classroom could have their own camera or their own laptop, and they could join in if we were in an auditorium with that many students, because sometimes we're presenting to, like May 7th, we'll present to in 30 minutes 170 kids in this Lafayette school we're going to present to. There would be no way we could have that many children in a gym. It would be way too high. We wouldn't be able to get our metrics. So it definitely benefited us to do it through Zoom, because like I said, each grade was in their classroom, logged onto their tablets. So we were able to present to a larger group of people that way.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now, the same question that I asked Jill, I would like to ask Kaylee. I'll reread it again because I know we probably forgot. So it's the nature of virtual internships remove geographic barriers. Was it difficult to adjust your mindset to embrace the many possibilities once geography was no longer a limitation? Why or why not? Is Haley here? Haley?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you said Katie.
No, I'm sorry, Haley. Did you want me to reread the question?
No, I got it.
Okay.
I think I wasn't prepared for it at first because, like I said in that question for Katie, I did not have any idea at all how virtual internships would work. But getting to have options in Lafayette or even like anywhere in the state and Baton Rouge. Like, I didn't think that that would be an option. Like, Miss White was telling me about how I could do virtual internships and how that would probably be the best option for me. And I had no idea how it would work. I would think it would still be in Lake Charles, and it definitely gave me like a lot more options.
All right, that's a great answer. It looks like Jade Schultz has a question, so go ahead when you're ready, Jade.
My question is for everyone or anyone who wants to answer. Do you feel you got as much out of your internship doing it virtually than you would have had it been in person? You know, do you feel like you learned as much as you could have and got as much out of it?
I think for me, I felt like if I would have did it face to face, I maybe would have got to connect more with the people I work with and with the clients that we helped. But not having that face to face interactions, I felt like that I didn't make that connection.
Anybody else would
I
like to
agree. I felt
respond?
the same. Yeah, I felt the same. I just felt like it would have been great to be more hands-on and there. But still, I mean, I think it's amazing how all of our programs kind of made it work despite, you know, the distance. I still got so much out of it. It did make me want to continue. Like, I've talked to my program, and so that I will be continuing to volunteer when they need help, because I loved it and I want to find out more. So
Awesome. Thank you, ladies.
I don't feel like it was a handicap at all for me. For me, I had to play catch up because I was dealing with a national organization that already ran like this. So I was walking in the door going, okay, well, it's going to be very limited on what I could be a part of because it's all virtual. And then I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, these girls do this all day. Like, I'm the one who needs to play catch up. So I don't feel like I was limited. I feel like I really got to jump into how the organization runs. And like I said before, they have people across the country that are national staff. So I was the one that had to play catch up.
So you can look at it two ways, Katie. You were either playing catch up or you just learned a lot. So it's a positive thing for sure.
So much. I learned so much.
Okay. It looks like Lauren Joubert, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, has a question. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hey, okay, so how did y'all keep track of y'all hours since y'all were not like at a physical place? Like, did y'all do it through trainings? Like, how did y'all make the 120 hours? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for me personally, it was kind of hard because most of my hours ended up being like through research on social media campaigns, on adoption, on how things work specifically with our agency. And it was a little difficult to make my hours every week, but I found a way and I did it. And my supervisor was really helpful in making sure that I had enough to do.
for us, we had to keep, had to do, like, I don't know if your question is more technical but like we had to keep a timesheet with them as well as with us. So I would have to do a timesheet for the internship that I had to the 15th and the 30th. You'd have to send in, and my supervisor and I, because I'm very insecure is not the right word. My therapist would say that it's totally insecure. I need to know that, like, I am pleasing you and doing what you need. So I need that, like, check in and kind of validation to know I'm on the right track and like I'm an asset rather than like this thing you have to deal with. So for us, we worked out a system because she's truly great. And so at the end of every day that I did work for her, I would send an email and say like, hey, Letitia, this is what I accomplished today. And I would give just bullet points of like, I watched this webinar, I worked on the toolkit or whatever. And then the next day she could respond with, great, I'm going to see your work on this, or super, today focus on this. And it was so helpful to have that daily check-in with her and a little bit of feedback versus just being like, okay, so this week get something done and we'll see you next week kind of thing.
I know for me, my site supervisor, she would send me the information like all on Monday, everything that I needed to have done by that Friday. So I kind of just spaced it out where I could do, I'll do this many a night or do this many, kind of break it up and not just do it, because I could have just did it all in one night and got all the hours, but I just broke it up so I could do it, space it out throughout the week.
For me, my site supervisor couldn't really care about my hours. They just knew that I was there for an internship and they were going to work me. So I would let them know, hey, I've only put in 3 hours this week. What can I help you out with? But also on shifts, every time I was logging out, I was writing down that number. So I knew that I needed to keep about 10 hours a week, and that would put me a little bit ahead of the game. And so whenever Miss White would send me my hours, I would compare that with the hours that I already had in my list. So I kind of already knew where I was in my progress throughout the entire semester, just because I like to take notes. So
I think it's important just to touch on what everyone said. We talk about it being virtually and like not really having that connection. But like Megan was saying earlier, if you just email and touch base, hey, I'm touching base about this, what's going on about this, what do you need from me? I think that makes a world of a difference. I mean, it shows them that you are truly committed to this. So that's important too. So I see that Casey Jones has a question, so I'll go ahead and give her an opportunity to speak.
Hey, so I know some of y'all said virtual internship, you feel like you were at a disadvantage for in-person ones. Is there anything that you feel you learned through the virtual internship that maybe put you at an advantage over in-person internship?
yeah, I got to network with people across the country, all from different backgrounds. And so to use that to our advantage, to hear different viewpoints, I think it's immeasurable the amount that, I thought it was so cool that it wasn't just, Southwest Louisiana people that I was dealing with. No offense, love you guys, but being able to have that network to lean into was way cool.
I know for me, it was an advantage because I have a son and I work full time, so I could still work and take care of my son and do my internship. So that was the great advantage of doing it virtual.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Like as a parent, it's a lot easier to be able to manage it if you're not, because I work a regular 9-to-5 job. So then like if you work full time and then you have to leave there to go somewhere else, it's easier to be able to do it from home. Also, one thing that I think that I could take away from it was I did learn that how to manage time better, I think. I mean, as like a personality trait, again, not great, but like kind of flaky and fly by the seat of my pants, just like, okay. So like my mind is chaotic. So I'm always like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. So this really taught me like, okay, you have a job you have to get done. That's not like at a tangible place. So you just have to figure it out. And I came out of it feeling a little more confident in my abilities to manage my time. Definitely appreciate my family more for their patience with me. I think I came out of it with a lot more positives than negatives regarding the whole like long distance thing are doing it virtually.
And I want to say something else to kind of agree with what Megan is saying. That's another thing. I'm kind of like her. Like I usually don't make schedules. I just do whatever when I get off of work. But it made me have a time schedule because I knew I got off of work at 5 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, I had to start my internship. So I got to get this done in an hour to start working on these tax returns. So it made me manage my time way better. It made me, now I feel like I'm going to do that all the time. Like in my other classes, I had to manage my time better too, because I had to do my internship at this time. So I had to factor in, okay, after my internship, I have to do my homework for the other classes.
We haven't heard from Jill lately. Could you answer the question?
Yeah, like I said earlier, having it done virtually, the advantage was that we could present to a lot of kids. So for me, for my hours to do these presentations, it was a lot of work with the team. We would have to get together and decide who was going to say what. There also, as a presenter, I also taught how to be a presenter to other volunteers. So that was also a part of my hours. Those presentations for those were 3 hours long. When we present to students, that was an hour. So and also connecting with schools. So that took a lot of time too. So a lot of my hours went into emails, connecting with schools, preparing for the presentations, helping the other volunteers know how many kids we were presenting to so they can go and provide the schools with the supplies they needed. So it was really easy in my internship to get enough hours. And of course, with the American Red Cross, and they do so many other things besides early preparedness. So we would have our weekly meetings whenever we would go over okay, what are we going to do this week? What are our presentations? What schools are we going to connect to? If there was a lag, they would have me go into with the winter storm. I had to contact people who had the Red Cross have gone to their house due to fires. I had to call them to make sure that they didn't need anything. Do they need shelter or blanket? So I had there was always something for me to do with the American Red Cross. Sometimes I did step out of the hazard preparedness and I went into something else, but for me to meet my hours it was actually really easy. There was, like I said, there was always something to do. And they also, through Red Cross Volunteer Connections, I also had to log my hours for them because they wanted to make sure when I was logging in for Microsoft shifts met their login hours too. So that's how they kind of kept track of my hours.
I want to add a quick comment about Jill's work with teaching or facilitating the classes. This program was, if I understand correctly, Jill, this program was created in New Orleans right after Katrina,
Right.
and now it is going national. So it's really cool that the Louisiana chapter was an innovator in this, and Jill gets to be part of that process of expanding it. So yay.
Yes, it was exciting being that it came from Louisiana. It was a lot of fun to present.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. White. It looks like Mary Bergen has a question, so we'll move on and let her ask. So whenever you're ready, Mary.
So like I said, I also did virtual, and we met once a week to discuss work that I had previously done, and I used a Excel spreadsheet, and that's where she would put all of my information like, hey, let's do this for this following week. And one of the things that I don't want to call it busy work, but I did a lot of grant research for them. So did any of you guys have that kind of thing where it's oh, hey, I need an extra 2 or 3 hours. I can do this grant research. That was what I could do. We never put a time limit on the grant research. It was if I finished my other stuff before and still had 2 or 3 hours, I could spend 2 or 3 hours just looking at grant research. Did anyone have anything like that?
For me, it was working on our social media accounts, how they're run, and I think I must have made about 100 different social media posts for Miss Leslie to use.
And Haley, that touches on, again, you know, social media. I mean, as much as it has its pros and cons, we could all agree on that. But, you know, this is the world that we live in. So you connect with a lot of people through social media that way. So that's a great response. Thank you, Mary, for that question. Jill, I did want to ask you something. You talked about the schools that y'all did the presentations for, and you said Lafayette. So you guys serviced Lafayette Parish, or was it other neighboring parishes that you guys serviced?
We definitely focused on Lafayette, Acadiana, because they do something called Sound the Alarm, and their signature city this year was Lafayette. So they did focus a lot on, especially the month of March, and even I think it was from like March to May. They're doing the Sound the Alarm. So we wanted to do a lot of schools out there just to kind of build up to Sound the Alarm. Like so May 7th, we're doing a presentation at Woodville elementary school, and which it must be a really big elementary school because like I was saying before, each grade there's like 100 and something kids, 100 something students, so it's a big school I got. So I was excited to book that. But yeah, they did focus a lot on Acadiana Parish, more so than even Calcasieu. I think because of the Sound the Alarm, they were trying to give that build up and kind of get that information out. And that Sound the Alarm is when they go into areas where people do not have smoke detectors in their homes, and people meet and they go into communities and they install these smoke detectors. So it was like leading to a build up to that.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, I was asking because I work for Vermilion Parish Schools, so that is a neighboring parish to us. Did anybody have any questions for Jill? Okay, so we will move on to the final question, and this question will be for everyone to answer.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I have one for everybody. Was there anything that you liked about your internship being virtual? Like we did ours partially virtual some weeks, and there was times that I was more comfortable with it being virtual, you know, doing it over the phone. So was there anything like that for y'all that you were more comfortable doing it being virtual?
It definitely made it easier whenever, you know, I had more hours at work or my shifts changed and more schoolwork on a certain week or my midterms. I took some half semester courses while doing my internship just so that it'd be more divided, but that also is a faster pace class. So being virtual definitely helped me to be able to balance better because even though you know, St. Elizabeth had a certain set hours, Monday to Thursday, sometimes Friday. I could do work for them on a Saturday and still get my hours without having to worry about that.
Okay, thank you, Haley. It looks like Ms. White has a question.
I do. Before I ask my question, were there any others who wanted to respond to Aaron's question?
I'll say I feel like virtual kind of leveraged my relationship with the people that I was working with. I think I've said that probably a couple of times, but I ended up having a series of one-on-one virtual calls with a bunch of different staff members. So, I mean, there were times that we're making a cup of coffee or eating our breakfast. So we did get to kind of use it somewhat in a casual sense and get to connect about real stuff. And with that, I think I grew, I mean, a professional relationship, but I think that we also grew some friendships and understanding in it. So I saw a lot of benefits to my virtual relationship and my virtual internship.
Thank you for that, Katie.
Anyone else before I ask my final question? Okay. So my last question before Kristen's last question is, if we look back to the period of time when we were preparing for all of your internships, as y'all probably recall, we met and we talked about your life goals and we talked about all kinds of things to help me understand, you know, opportunities that you might have. So at the point that we started preparing for internships, I believe that none of y'all had where you ended up as your goal. when you started with me. I know Megan was very specific in her area, but not the organization. And I think there was a specific reason for that. But anyway, so how important was it to be open to new possibilities regarding organizations that you could partner with in order for you to have the best possible outcomes for your internship?
For me, I just went with it. I kind of took you as being a mentor with my future in mind. So whenever you suggested something to me that you were really excited about, I mean, I had to Google it later, but I was like, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to be that excited about it, I'm in. Whatever that means, I'm in. So it was kind of a leap of faith, and it was nowhere close to what I thought that I would be doing for my internship. And honestly, I think that it was a really great fit for me. And I mean, it's just endless amounts of stuff that I soaked up here. So it was just a leap of faith, and I think it was well worth it.
Katie, I think Ms. White is just very, very known for that. She'll just bring us out of our comfort zone. So, and that's what we love about her.
Shoves of love.
Anyone else want to respond to that?
Yeah, so for me, I was really worried about finding a good place, but I'm just going to throw out a number because I don't know the exact amount. I'd have to go count. Probably about 8 classes with Miss White. And she definitely knows how much working in adoption means to me. So whenever it came to finding what I wanted to do for my internship, I put 100% trust into her. And I was like, whatever you think is going to help me the most and fit best for me.
I'm sure Miss White is probably not pleased that this is turning into a love Miss White conversation, but I wanted to get in on it. So I knew that I wanted to do something with DV because I know that's my career. Like, I'm where I work right now will be where I work until I don't work. But so when we were talking about it, I just thought, I don't really know, like, whatever you think, DCFS, whatever you have. She asked my dream placement. I told her, and no way. Like, at first they even came back, I think, to her and we're like, yeah, we can't really do that. And, Miss White does not give up, and she is convincing. And they were like, okay, great, let's do it. So she told me exactly what I needed to do to make it work. She was a great resource through the whole thing. But honestly, from the beginning, I had no idea where I would go because I figured LCADD wouldn't work, and I was just leaving it in her hands because I think, like you said, Haley, you knew she wanted adoption, you wanted something in adoption, and like Catherine, you trusted her completely, and it just made it so much easier to work with someone who has your best interest in mind and can just really get things done that she should not be able to.
I totally agree, Megan. It's all in love, Miss White, I promise you. So I'm going to ask this final question, and what I'll do, just so we don't get confused, I'll just call on you just so that everybody has a turn to respond. So the final question is going to be, what advice would you give an upcoming intern preparing for a virtual placement? So we'll begin this question with Ashley.
The advice I would give is to, keep your options open and have great communication. And if you need help, ask Ms. White, or if you need help, ask your site supervisor. But be honest, like how you feel about your placement, and be honest about the area you kind of want to go into. But keep your options open, or keep your mind open to maybe not getting exactly what you want, but something kind of along the lines. Because for me, I wanted to deal with people with poverty. And at first, when she told me about this VITA internship, I just thought about taxes. I didn't think about, dealing with people with poverty, but it does all connect. So I just say keep your mind open.
Awesome. I totally agree with that, Ashley. I think it really does heighten our abilities too when we are faced with adversity and learning different things that we never knew. Okay, next up, Jill. If you want to respond to the question, I'll read it again. What advice would you give to an upcoming intern preparing for virtual placement?
Really to get comfortable with technology, because I know myself, I have never, we worked in Microsoft Teams, but I never used Zoom, which is very similar, but getting, learning more computer skills, like, because sometimes you have to be a little creative when you're doing things virtually. But to also be excited about it, because like we said, there's a lot of pluses to it. You know, you get to connect with more people. You get to have an intern that can have more flexibility around your own schedule if you're a mom or you are. You get to, I know Haley has said you can even work on the weekends. I think if you were going to an organization that was only open Monday through Friday, you wouldn't have that flexibility. So with the drawbacks, there's a lot of pluses too. So definitely stay excited about it. It's not, because I will admit at first I didn't know how that was going to work out, but I think we all still felt connected to the people we worked with. There was a lot of, for me, pluses. In the beginning, I know y'all had all said about what internship you wanted. I wanted to work with youth. I wanted to work with kids in school. So actually it all kind of panned out well for me, because like this year with COVID, you couldn't go into a school. So even if she had found me a placement in a school, I probably would have had to switch over to something else. So I kind of got the best of both worlds, working in schools via Zoom and also meeting people at the American Red Cross. So just kind of keep your mind open as to the possibilities of like the stuff you can learn in a virtual internship. And also, you know, with COVID-19, I think a lot of offices, because I mean, I have a lot of clients who work at hospitals and their jobs were relocated to their homes. You know, they all had to go home because of COVID and learn to work through technology. So that's just kind of life. You have to learn to adjust to it whenever things happen, and things can happen, and you have to make adjustments to it. But still definitely be excited about it. It's still a lot of fun, and you can learn, you know, you can meet a lot of people, and there's a lot of pluses to it.
Great response. I agree. I think so too. You know, it's important that we look at things, and like you said, a school, you know, our schools were affected, but it's like you think about what can you do and how could you be effective in your internship whenever so many different places are affected. So that's true as well. Let's move on. We'll go next to Haley. And the question is, what advice would you give an upcoming internship to prepare for virtual placement?
Communicate. Not be afraid to say what you need to say to understand, because sometimes it can get confusing. Be patient, especially right now. I feel like, you know, next year's interns will be a little bit more prepared because they still have classes to take. They're going to learn more about technology and the current way to do things than we got to before we started our virtual internships. And never, ever be afraid to ask for help. If there's one thing I've learned from Miss White's classes, never be afraid to ask for help. And my supervisor for my intern was a lot like Miss White in that way. And she was like, I don't care if it's 12 at night, 2 in the morning, you know, you have a question, text me, I'll answer it when I can. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's the main thing, and it can go for a lot more than just internships.
That's awesome, Haley. You know, it's awesome that you have the support because I think that also could play a factor in how your internship goes. If you don't feel like you have that support, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm here, I have to do these hours. But if you have the support, it does make the world of a difference. So that's awesome. Thank you. Next up, we'll let Megan answer the question. So what is some advice you would give an upcoming internship preparing for virtual placement?
First, I would say, if possible, maybe don't take a full caseload, like course load of classes, because it can get a little overwhelming when you have all those classes and the internship. But if you do it, then you can do it. Probably gonna power through. Also, like touching on what Haley said, asking for help is huge. You forget. I think I just did not tap into that resource until the end, when finally, like Miss White, I was just like blowing up her chats every week and being like, okay, here's like, she knows all of my personal family business at this point, because I'll be like, let me tell you what my husband did today that has thrown me off, that is now not making me productive with my internship. And what do you suggest? Like, I even got him Christmas presents she suggested, and wife of the year. But like, tap into her help, and even like other people who are doing the internship too. It's great to be able to, I know some of you I've communicated with like on a weekly basis, and just being like, hey, are you drowning? Me too. Great. What are you, how are you staying alive? And also the open-mindedness. I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't sure if I would get LCADV, but even watching this and being a part of all these groups and listening to what everybody, I'm thinking like, well, I want like a round 2, because I'd really love to be involved in that program. You know, so you'll get something out of everything we learned, like last, like he was talking about in fall semester, all the different jobs you can have in this kind of program that we're in, and you can make everyone like learn, all your skills can fit into any kind of job placement that you have. So that's probably it.
That is absolutely great advice about the course load, Megan. I think that is something that I didn't consider. And listen, I regretted it. But you know what? It made me stronger. It made me more resilient, and I was ready to go. And last but definitely not least, Katie. So I'm just going to reread the question because I did that with everyone. What is advice that you would give to an upcoming intern preparing for virtual placement?
I would say you need to do your research on the organization and show up ready to go. It was a really big thing. So just to be there and be in the conversation, in the meeting, even if they're talking way above your head about stuff you don't understand, write those words down and ask what that stuff means later. And then last, I think that something that really helped me was just asking what extra I could do. And I found that week after week, whenever I'd ask my supervisors, okay, cool, but what else could I help out with? I could see them kind of opening it up to me saying, you know what, well, I think it'd be fun to have you on this task or fun to have you on that task. So letting them know that I'm really here and I'm bringing 200% of me, and let's see how I can be an asset to you guys. That's my best advice that I have.
Thank you for that. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. It looks like Dr. Elijah has a question before we close out with Ms. White's final remarks. So go ahead, Dr. Elijah, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, I have 2 remarks. Well, kind of 2 announcements. Announcement number 1 is that I want to publicly again say hello and congratulations to Miss White on completing her very tough, difficult general examination. She has advanced and she has conquered, and ladies, you all can do the same. You all can do the same. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, taking this opportunity, I want to say, because you're graduating, you're going to leave the university, I want to chat with you for 15 minutes individually, ask you a couple questions and get your feedback on overall program. So I would really appreciate if you could schedule a meeting with me on Teams, and you don't have to be visual, but visual is always nice, and it will come at a later point. And it's like an outgoing interview with the program coordinator. So I appreciate that. And finally, I want to say thank you all. You have done such a great, wonderful internships, and you have presented your outcomes. I really am proud. I am like saying, we'll chat with Miss White and we'll see what we can do for the next group. But you have been excellent. I want to say thank you so very much. You've done an excellent, excellent job. I'm proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elijah. And we want to thank you for your time, because we know you are super busy, but you still made time for us. So that means a lot to us. So Ms. White, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Great. So I want to start by thanking the panelists who participated in this session. I also want to thank all of our interns and our moderators who took time to prepare for today, and for the interns who shared their video reports with us. It was so informative to watch your video reports, and I loved hearing your answers to the different questions. I just really appreciate all of y'all playing along with my crazy idea to have a virtual conference. I also want to reiterate what y'all have heard me say over and over again. I'm going to cry now because I mean it so passionately. I believe in each of you so much. I know that you are going to change the world. I pray every day that I can help you build those skills that you're going to need to do that valuable work that you're going to have out in the world. And so I thank you for playing along with me for the last few semesters, all of my crazy activities, all of my crazy assignments, because each of those were intended with love, as Katie mentioned. I shove with love to give you those valuable skills for the next step in your journey. And I believe in each of you. I love each of y'all. I hope that you continue to stay in contact with me and Dr. Elijah, because that gives us such great joy to hear about the amazing things that our students, even after they've graduated, do in the world. And so that is my last comment. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope y'all have an amazing weekend.